This is 100 Years of Cox. You are listening to a podcast by Frances Thompson. I'm telling the story of 10 siblings from the Machell Cox family through the letters they wrote to each other. They were born in England between 1868 and 1884. 7 of them lived in England and 3 lived abroad in the colonies. These siblings are my family. Sibling number 2, Edmund, is my great-grandfather. The 10 siblings started writing a circular letter to each other called the Family Budget in 1906. They continued for the rest of their lives, and then their children continue the stream of letters. The last poignant letter was written in 1987 by David, Arthur's son. I'm continuing reading excerpts from the 1907 Christmas Budget, which was written by the siblings and intended to be read aloud in the drawing room on Christmas Day afternoon, after tea and presents. If you haven't heard the first half of the Christmas Budget, go back and download episode 22. St Albans, 13 Longton Avenue in Sydenham, was the family home, and Bernard, Cuthbert, Avice and Vera were there during Christmas 1907. The family went to church, had a big lunch of turkey and plum pudding. The Christmas Day routine continued, with the men going for a walk whilst the ladies fell asleep in the drawing room. Then it was tea and presents, with the siblings taking it in turn to read the Christmas Budget aloud. I hope you are sitting comfortably. You might like to imagine you were in a comfortable but formal drawing room, wearing early 1900s period costume. You've eaten a big lunch of turkey and plum pudding, and the maid has cleared it away and done the washing up. Attempt to shadow a missing lady. The mysterious disappearance of an unfortunate young lady answering to the name of Miss Mena McHell, and the detailed description we publish below, has caused a painful sensation in Devonport circles. So far as can be ascertained, on the morning of December 21st, the ill-fated lady had been engaged for some hours in evolving an elaborate and entirely new system for collecting and arranging her thoughts, a human hobby which entails little suffering on anyone but herself, when at the hour of 11 o'clock precisely, a side wind arose, and without a moment's warning, she was rapidly carried away by conflicting emotions in an easterly direction and was soon lost in the clouds. During the next 24 hours, several reports were handed to the police by the coastguards from various stations. From these we learn that she appears to have travelled in the direction of London at an average rate of 55 miles an hour. In the neighbourhood of Exeter, where she slowed down and actually became stationary for some minutes, she is reported as going backwards, obviously under little control, but appeared to be throwing out feelers with a view to reversing her position. Her efforts do not seem to have proved successful, for at Salisbury she was observed to be rolling to and fro in an alarming manner, and a serious accident appeared to be imminent. From that time onwards, no further information about her movements is forthcoming, but it is feared that the worst has occurred. It is with the wish to relieve the natural anxiety that we publish this account, together with a brief description of the missing lady. It is confidently hoped that so widely circulated a periodical as the Budget will do much to unravel a mystery by which the police have, for once, frankly owned themselves to be baffled. Personal appearance. Generally considered prepossessing. Blonde. Naturally wavy hair, broad feet. Age, not known but palpably very young. Height, insignificant. Deportment, faulty. Marks and blemishes. A scar, probably self-inflicted, resembling a dimple in the left cheek. This, like the disfigurement on Druce's nose, unfortunately is on the side of the face not shown in the portrait given. Little finger of left hand curiously distorted and resembling a misshapen pawn. This finger is generally carried in the mouth for the purpose of concealment. Clothing. When last seen was wearing black stockings, and her hair was secured at the back, more or less, by a tortoiseshell clasp. Manners. Brusque, distrait. Conversation. Voluble. Pet name. Among her intimate friends, Misdemeanor's name has, by an obvious pun, been transformed to Avice. Tradesmen and others often corrupt her surname to Machell. Language. Speaks a sort of pidgin English with a foreign accent. Accomplishments. No great performer on the piano, but fairly adept at organising. Cannot play chess, but is skilful as a draftsman. Favourite motto. It's never too late. Disposition. Amiable under sympathetic treatment. Written by Machell Cox, 1907. 2020 notes on misdemeanour. Arthur adds underneath, by a curious coincidence, most of the important events in Misdemeanor's life hitherto have taken place at the 11th hour. Arthur also includes a silhouette of Avice's head and features, made using black paper. I will put this silhouette on Twitter, @CoxLetters. Why don't you go and have a look? Avice was always doing something wrong, and her siblings laughed at her a great deal, in a good-natured way. Arthur names the character Misdemeanor, but he spells it as Miss, new word de, new word Mena, spelled M-E-N-A, Misdemeanor McHell. Arthur is regularly addressed as Mr. Machell, as well as Machell, and even McHell. Cuthbert also told stories of Machell being pronounced in similarly inaccurate ways. Arthur clearly thinks McHell is the funniest variation, and Avice is also clearly used to being addressed as Avice, which he doesn't like. Arthur also mentions Druce, one of the men in the famous Druce Portland court case, which was in the newspapers for months. He says Druce has a scar on his face, just like Avice does. And lastly, travelling at a speed of 55 miles an hour sounds quite acceptable to us. But in 1907 that speed would have been unheard of. Motor cars might have been able to travel at 20 miles per hour at the time, but most roads were not paved, so no one generally travelled anywhere at any great speed. The next item in the Christmas budget was written by Bernard. He wrote a poem about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. Arthur and Cuthbert later declare that they like it, that Bernard should get it published, and that they will use it to teach Tudor history to their schoolboys. I have no evidence that any of these poems written by the family have ever been published. The 6 wives. When bluff King Henry married young, grave Catherine of Aragon, he heard so oft her praises sung, he thought she was a paragon. Pray, let me introduce my wife. Divorced, she spent her later life. His second spouse was Anne Boleyn, waiting already on the spot. No need a courtship to begin, his heart already she had got. Pray, let me introduce my wife. She fell beneath the headsman's knife. Jane Seymour next became his queen, and cheered the monarch's lonely state. Their wedded life was all serene, he quite forgot Queens Anne and Kate. Pray, let me introduce my wife. She died, but left behind a life. Plain Anne of Cleves was sought for next, our gracious lord the king to wed. But when he saw her he was vexed, and oh such naughty words he said. Pray let me introduce my wife. Divorced, she gladly left the strife. The Lady Catherine Howard soon was married to the hearty king. They spent a happy honeymoon, and then her knell began to ring. Pray let me introduce my wife. On Tower Hill she lost her life. The sixth and last was Catherine Parr, and she was sober and sedate. But though she sometimes went too far, she soothed him down before too late. Pray let me introduce my wife. The king's decease prolonged her life. Written by Bernard Machell Cox in 1907. The next article was written by Edmund, who is the third sibling who decided to write an ABC poem for the Christmas budget. It includes descriptions of the characters of the siblings, and it is clear how much they cared for each other. Despite being scattered around England, as well as in foreign countries, these 10 siblings were clearly quite devoted to each other. The budget alphabet. A stands for Avice, and Arthur her brother. 2 members, whilst Aldwin's too far for another. B stands for budget, I hardly need say, and Bernard, whose chuckle delights us all day. C stands for Cuthbert, a broth of a boy, so tall and so proper, the family joy. D stands for Dorothy, what can I say? Has she left the poor budget for fear of delay? E stands for Enid, the eldest of all, and for Edmund as well, renowned for his ball. F stands for fines, to be paid for the crime of keeping the budget beyond its due time. G stands for genius, as so often displayed by some of the B, may their effort never fade. H stands for happiness, brought by the news that the budget has come once more to amuse. I stands for ink, and J stands for jokes. If you're looking for rhyme, you'll find but a hoax. K stands for kindred, so knitted together by love of the budget in foul or fair weather. L stands for literary supplement added to letters that sometimes may well be termed padded. M stands for Machell, the B's family name, and also for mother, who gave us the same. N stands for Neville, who writes a long letter to put in the budget. It cannot be better. O stands for opinions we like to express when writing our budget, some more and some less. P stands for paper and also for pen, as used for the budget by women and men. Q stands for questions, I warn you, beware. The budget requires them answered with care. R stands for reading, the budget inviting, to which we look forward in spite of the writing. S stands for stories, related with zest. The hazel ones chiefly are voted the best. T stands for temper, with which we all take the digs at each other that one and all make. U stands for unity, much brought about by family budget without any doubt. V stands for Vera, athletic young maid. At hockey, her ankles are often displayed. W's Wilfred, who's too far away to write for the budget more than once in a way. X stands for Xmas, when all hope to see the B Xmas number at breakfast or tea. Y stands for yarns, often told by the members. Let's hope they'll continue for many Decembers. Z stands for zenith, reached at the finish. We pray that the budget will never diminish. Written by Edmund Machell Cox, 1907. Enid wrote a prize competition. History, geography and general knowledge from 1907 is surprisingly hard to work out, even when you have the internet to help. So far I have 9 answers out of 21 questions. Please help me work out some of the answers to Enid's competition and send them to me via Twitter @CoxLetters or in an email, machellcoxletters@gmail.com. Prize competition devised by Enid Machell Isles. The correct answers, which should all be proper names, are composed of words which can be made out of the word hospitable. The letters of this word may not be used more than once in each answer, and of course they need not all be used. Solutions to be sent to the prize editor at 187 Lodge Lane, Liverpool, whose decision is to be final. Hospitable. 1. The capital of one of the Balkan states. 2. One of Wagner's heroines. 3. A Greek philosopher. 4. A mountain range. 5. An innocent victim. 6. A place of banishment. 7. A mathematician. 8. Half a European capital. 9. A mother in Israel. 10. A book of the Apocrypha. 11. An important Swiss town. 12. An English county. 13. A well-known Italian town. 14. The raven's foster child. 15. The beloved of Pyramus. 16. One of the Scottish Hebrides. 17. An English essayist. 18. A mountain in Palestine. 19. An unjust judge. 20. A Scotch seaport. And finally, 21. One of Shakespeare's heroines. 2020 notes on Enid's letter. The answers I have got are the Greek philosopher, a mountain range, one of the books of the Apocrypha, a town in Switzerland and a town in Italy, and the beloved of Pyramus. This one is about Babylonian mythology. I also know the answer to the Scottish Hebridean island and the seaport in Scotland. All the answers include letters from the word hospitable. I'm hoping Enid included the answers in one of her letters in 1908, as I am stuck. I need to read ahead in the budget and look for the answers. Enid and Cyril were living at 187 Lodge Lane in Liverpool, and Enid instructs her siblings to post their competition entries to her there. The house is still there, but the address isn't, as the council renamed and renumbered the street in 1908. Enid complained about it, saying it was chaotic, as parcels and letters were delivered to all the wrong houses. And there was some discussion in the budget that Lodge Lane sounded a bit common, but Sefton Park Road sounds much more genteel. Enid's large old house is now called 27 Sefton Park Road. When Enid's family was living there, it's likely there was stabling for a horse and cart, and she had a staff of several domestic servants. But the interesting thing is that a stone gatepost is still there, clearly marked with both the number 187 as well as the number 27. If you open up maps and drop the little yellow figure down, you can walk up and down Sefton Park Road and look at all the large old houses. It looks like Enid and Cyril's large house, where they lived with their children and several servants, is now divided up into flats. Anyone living in Liverpool listening to this? Please go knock on the door and tell them about this podcast. Rev Dr John Charles Cox was the father to the 10 siblings, and he was also my great-great-grandfather. As well as being a Church of England parish priest, he had been involved in politics in his younger days, and he was a historian and an antiquarian. He wrote numerous books on churches. He was interested in the little details, the carved end of pews, the windows, the font, the pulpit. He knew absolutely everything about every single Anglican church in Derbyshire. He had a phenomenal intellect and was a real character. Carol singers, especially in November, would drive him into a rage, especially as they were often street boys who were essentially begging. Both Vera and Bernard described hilarious accounts of Dr. Cox and his anger at carol singers. This was a topic of conversation for many years, as similar scenarios occurred in subsequent years. This next poem, which was described by the siblings as a ballad, was written by Dr. Cox about the audacious street boys who sang Christmas carols outside his house in Longton Avenue in November. Carolling at Sydenham, a true incident, November 1907. The editor heaved a big sigh and looked as if he would pipe his eye. 'Twas less than a week to the printing day of the Christmas budget, yet sure as a nugget, among all his contributors never a one had offered a carol. What was to be done? But a carol true, though in metre mild, must have for its theme the Holy Child. It cannot therefore be taken in hand, in a hasty way, or flippantly scanned, but in place of a carol tale, to save from disgrace may perchance avail. The suburbs of Sydenham is the scene of this story brief, but it's true, I ween, where the lads and lasses were all so greedy, though not exactly poor or needy, that more than a month from Christmas time, when the weather was mild, no frost or rime, they attempted to sing, as soon as 'twas dark, Christmas carols or Christmas hymns, piping them out as though 'twas a lark, making the coming season a jest, and proving themselves a perfect pest. This last November, as well I remember, a bevy of boys made no end of noise, shouting out with a painful din the solemn words of a Christmas hymn, as they stood on the steps of a parson's villa, hoping to get some copper or silver. The parson had just sat down to dinner, when the singing began. As I'm a sinner, he said in his haste, those evil boys have already begun their untimely noise. I'll stop it at once. He sprang to the door. The night was dark and the rain did pour. He opened the door in a violent way. Be off this moment, it's not near Christmas Day, he shouted out, and the scared boys flew down the steep steps and were lost to view. All save one, the biggest of the lot, who unabashed moved not a jot, but held up in the light so dim what the parson thought was a book for him, to put down the sum they hoped to win. As for you, he stormed, it's surely a sin that one so big should join in this din. Go home this minute and cease your bother. You deserve a spanking at once from your mother. Then raising his hand, this petulant crow at the papers held out struck a violent blow, and the papers were scattered in mud and mire. Said a deep bass voice, restrain your ire. I'm only the postman. You've made a rare mess of your evening letters. They're all of a muck. A little less haste, you'd have better luck. Out of the darkness, the boys' voices rang. Ha, ha, ho, ho, they jeeringly sang, and the door was shut with a noisy bang. John Charles Cox, 1907. The next two articles are artwork, so you'll only get to see them if you go and look up @CoxLetters on Twitter, but I will try and describe them to you now. Avice, Vera and Arthur were the talented artists in the family, and they really were quite talented. Vera's pen and ink drawing was the frontispiece for the 1907 Christmas budget, at Bernard's request. It is called Cottages at Studland, and Vera would have drawn a version of it when the family were in Studland, Dorset, for the whole of August, when they were on holiday in the summer of 1907. I must try and find out if the cottages that Vera drew are still standing in Studland today. Avice's artwork consists of sketches of the family entitled Christmas at Sydenham. Avice drew pen and ink stick figures of the family at 13 Longton Avenue over Christmas. Avice or Vera are standing at the bottom of the stairs, with what looks like mistletoe hanging above them. There is an image of a large fireplace, with big paintings on either side. It is Christmas Eve, and the siblings are decorating the drawing room for Christmas, with what is possibly fresh branches of holly and ivy. Another sketch is of a large, old-fashioned bed, with a fabric canopy of drapes above it, entitled Father and Mother on Christmas Morn, with another sprig of mistletoe hanging above them. There is a drawing of 2 lumpy stockings hanging up, and the label says, Santa Claus visits Avice and Vera. There is a drawing of the garden, with the title After Christmas Dinner. Mother and father are standing watching, and 4 siblings, 2 male and 2 female, are playing hockey on the lawn. And in the last sketch, father stands at the door to the drawing room, arms stretched wide, with mother, Cuthbert, Bernard, Avice and Vera standing waiting. The caption is, Tea and presents are all here. 1907 was a much simpler age, and I find this snapshot from the past, depicting a loving family enjoying a simple Christmas, quite fascinating. No Queen's speech, no TV or movies or social media, not even phone calls to other members of the family. A telephone had not yet been installed in Longton Avenue. Don't get me wrong, I like video phone chats to family members living abroad. It's just fascinating to imagine a world where the only contact with friends and families was by letter. If you are interested, look up @CoxLetters on Twitter, where I will post Vera's and Avice's art. Bernard's contribution was a literary competition based on Every Man's Library, which was a catalogue of books divided into different subjects. He included the catalogue brochure in the Christmas budget, which has since been lost, and he asked everyone to choose the selection of 30 books that Bernard himself might have chosen. Bernard explains, "A literary competition. The editor has been requested to select 30 books out of Every Man's Library, which are to be sent to a man who at present is entirely without books and cannot obtain any. This man is of good education and has a Catholic taste in reading, being fond of poetry, history, travel, biography, fiction, in fact all sorts. The editor has accordingly selected 30 books from Every Man's list, a copy of which will be found with the budget Xmas number. 3 books in the biography section, 1 classical book, 3 books from the section on essays, 12 books of fiction, 3 history books, 4 poetry books, 1 book on romance, 1 book from the science section, and 2 books on travel equals 30 books. Budget readers are each requested to send in a list of 30 books as above, with the same number of books in each section as in the editor's list. The reader who sends in the list which most closely corresponds with the editor's will receive a prize. As a slight help to intending competitors, the editor begs to state that he has selected the books as if he was choosing them for himself. Consequently, he has not attempted to make out a list of the 30 best books, if that were indeed possible, but has chosen those which he thinks would give him the most pleasure if he happened to be in the same position as his friend. The editor's list is enclosed in a sealed envelope and has been deposited for safekeeping with Mrs. Marian Cox. A prize will also be given for the most popular list of those sent in, that is to say, the list which contains the greatest number of those books that appear oftenest on all the lists sent in. The editor hopes every member of the budget will compete. Colonial competitors are requested to send in their lists as soon as possible, as the competition will be kept open for them. Further details will be found in the Everyman catalogue. Competitors may not send in more than one list. For the purpose of this competition, a work in 1, 2 or 3 volumes counts as one volume. Any work in more than 3 volumes is not eligible, and these have been crossed out of the catalogue. The sections on oratory and philosophy have not been included in this competition. All the books in 2 or 3 volumes have been clearly marked in the catalogue as one volume and count as one book in each case. 2020 notes. I find this a peculiar but fascinating competition. Books were very expensive at the turn of the century, and only the comfortably wealthy could afford to buy them. Libraries were popular, but you had to pay a subscription to be allowed to use them. Books were therefore out of the reach of most working class people, and this was why magazines were so popular, like the Strand magazine, which included the Sherlock Holmes stories in serial form. One chapter of a book was included in such magazine each week, which encouraged readers to buy the magazine regularly, and buying a magazine was much cheaper than buying a book. Everyman's is still in existence today, publishing classics and good quality books. The website is everymanslibrary.co.uk. It was founded in 1906 by Joseph Dent, who said, "With 100 volumes, a man can be intellectually rich for life." It was still a man's world in 1907. Bernard states that his competition is aimed at a man who has no books. Joseph Dent formed his company so a man can be intellectually rich for life. Suffragettes were protesting about inequality, but it would be another 11 years before women over the age of 30 got the vote. The 3 foreign brothers in Africa and Canada would also have had access to Everyman's list in 1907, although the cost of actually buying them may have been prohibitive for them. But window shopping was still possible, which is the idea of Bernard's competition. Bernard basically says, if I was going to choose 30 books for myself from this list, which ones would I pick? And Mother already has a sealed envelope containing my list. The ladies' page comes next. The Machell Coxes were a very genteel family after all. I don't know who wrote this page, but it includes a dainty menu for a Christmas dinner, roast turkey, plum pudding and mince pies. I don't quite understand the humour, but the sibling who wrote it clearly thought it was amusing and would make the others laugh. The ladies' page. Roast turkey. Take a plump little turkey, if no one is looking, which must be no more than 18 inches round the waist. Brush it over with warm butter. Fold it in 2 and let it cook in a well-heated oven for 1/4 of an hour. At the end of that time, remove it gently from the oven and put a teaspoonful of white wine into its mouth. Place it in a clean basin and whisk until it is cold. Wipe its mouth with a clean white cloth and then place it in a fairly quick oven until its face is a delicate fawn colour. Add 1/2 pint of cream, and when it is on the point of boiling, stir in the yolk of 2 eggs. Tip it out and tie a band of stiff buttered paper round its tummy. Scatter with a finely minced shallot and a little salt, pepper, nutmeg and caster sugar. Serve with a small piece of watercress on the top of the bird and send for the doctor. Plum pudding. This should be quite simple. If not, it will probably be too rich. Mince pies. Make the outside of 2 pies. Fill them with mincemeat, 2 mushrooms, a prawn and a blanched and bearded oyster. Put them in a buttered stew pan with a little game stock. Place the pan on the stove. When the bottom is burnt out, take off the pan. Wipe the mixture and after cutting into moderately thick slices, stamp out with a sharp round cutter as many pies as are needed. Probably none after the turkey. The next piece is about fashion. The contents page doesn't say which sibling put this cutting into the Christmas budget or where it originated from. Probably from a magazine, I would think. I expect the siblings would have found this amusing at the descriptions of elaborate fashions for women, as well as the bizarre suggestion as to what men could do with their trousers if they became baggy at the knees. Fashions for Females by Mrs. Jack Devine. The other day I saw at Mrs. Lee's in New Bond Street a delightfully comfortable little house frock of spotted net, mounted over chiffon veiled taffeta. The long, full chiffon skirt is of a pure, deep violet tint, while the Empire bodice is a charming medley of fine ivory lace and mousseline. Only an artist could create such a gown, but then, of course, Mrs. Lee is an artist in the best sense of the term. With regard to blouses, white is the only permissible colour this year, in combination with a tailor-made costume. The smartest frocks have a blouse of crêpe de chine mixed with appliques of guipure, which are cut open at the neck to show a soft dark fur chemisette. It is perhaps not quite the proper thing to mention mere masculine garments here, but so many of my lady readers have husbands, brothers, sons, or young men that they may like to know of a useful hint, which was given me the other day by a male friend of mine. Everyone knows that the great trouble men have with their trousers is that they will, after a little wear, bag at the knees. The remedy is very simple. The trousers should, when they have been allowed to get into this state, be worn hindside before every other day. The children's corner is the next item, and it is just as twee and quaint as the ladies' page. No one would write anything like this today. It's not clear which sibling wrote this, but they are pretending to be an agony aunt type of person who is responding to letters which small children have sent in. I imagine the siblings would have laughed at this, but to us, 100 years later, it is merely odd and peculiar. I think it likely that Bernard wrote this. It is certainly written by a Cox sibling with an odd sense of humour. The children's corner. My dear little chicks, first of all I must wish you all from the bottom of my warm old heart a Merry Christmas. When you are eating your Christmas crackers, pulling puddings and breaking your new toys, please give one little thought to your dear old Auntie Fluffy, who will be having a lonely Christmas all to her little self. Drop one little tear in your plum pudding. Heave one little sigh between the mouthfuls of toothsome turkey while you think of me, and I shall be happy. I want you all, my precious pets, to learn these little poems during your Christmas holidays. Oft have I heard of Lucy Gray, and how she crossed the wild. How glad I am she lost her way, abominable child. Lives of great men all remind us we write bosh from time to time, and departing leave behind us many a foolish little rhyme. Hildebrand Higgs writes me a nice little letter, and he says he keeps a guinea pig, a white rat, and a tortoise all in one cage. You must be careful, Hildy, to feed the white rat, otherwise he very likely will eat off the guinea pig's tail. Yes, I think it is a weeny bit unkind to take the tortoise out for a run when you go out bicycling. What a pretty name you have. Bermeline Brown, thank you, dear, for your nice little note. What a pretty name you have. I am so glad to hear that you treat your pets so kindly. However, if you take your hedgehog to bed with you, it would be wiser to pluck it first. Priscilla Pert, what a pretty name you have. Your little note is a very nice one, but I do not quite understand your last question. You write, if I have a wisdom tooth when I grow up and have toothache in it, shall I be a wise acre? Perhaps it is a riddle, dear. Anyhow, I do not know the answer. Lancelot Lanolin Lewis writes, Dear Auntie Fluffy, I am 7 years old. I have 3 rabbits. My brother Percival has 5 pigeons, and Pussycat has 7 kittens. Cook has made me a big cake. I shall not eat it all myself, as that would be greedy. I do love the children's corner, except when I am put in it when I am naughty. Goodbye, dear Auntie, from your loving little Lancelot. A very nice little letter, dear. I was so interested in hearing about your Pussycat having 7 kittens. What a very pretty name you have. Flanelletta Foster. Thank you, my pet, for your nice little letter. I always look forward to your letters. You have such a pretty name. If your little dog Tootles is still sickly, and his coat looks dull, and his nose is hot and dry, put a little brilliantine on both. The editor says it is time I stopped. So goodbye, my darlings, from your loving Auntie Fluffy. The next piece was an engineering supplement, contributed by Enid and probably written by Cyril, her husband, who had thoroughly enjoyed working out the mathematics and being involved with creating this new engineering pump in 1907, along with Charlie Iles, his brother. The pump sold well, and the Rees Roturbo Manufacturing Company, based in Wolverhampton, was a thriving company until the 1930s. Engineering supplement. Centrifugal pumps. Mr. Edmund Rees of Thomas Parker Limited and the Rees Roturbo Development Syndicate of Wolverhampton describe a new method of starting or priming these pumps. They connect the constricted part of the nozzle with the interior of the impeller casing and with the suction pipe, so that a vacuum is created within the suction pipe casing. The suction pipe is fitted near its upper end with a clack valve for the purpose of establishing a starter circuit, which is disconnected after the suction pipe has been filled with water. For starting purposes, a tank is fitted containing water, which is put into communication with the box of the clack valve so as to create a vacuum in the pump casing. The editor's waste paper basket is the last section, including various bits and pieces that the siblings had sent to Bernard. Overheard in the Public Record Office, a limerick submitted by father. There was a young man of Nepal who went to a fancy dress ball as a halfpenny bun, but he hadn't much fun, for a pug snapped him up in the hall. An ode to the motor car. Twinkle, twinkle, little car, how I wonder what you are. How it is you smell so high, as you stinkle, stinkle by. 2020 notes. Motor cars in 1907 were smelly and noisy. Most roads were unpaved, so motor cars generated huge clouds of dust. They were very expensive, so only the fabulously wealthy could afford them. My family were comfortably wealthy, but none of them could afford a motor car, even if they wanted one, which most of them didn't. Father detested them. He liked to go walking, and he was furious that modern motor cars disturbed his rambles in the countryside. Mother went for a ride in one at Studland during their summer holidays, and she was petrified. Bernard next includes Actual advertisements from the Church Times, selected by Enid. The Church Times is still an independent Anglican weekly newspaper based in London. It was first published in 1863. The Church Times is mentioned a lot in the budget. Most of them read it. A copy is posted regularly to Bodleian in Africa. And holiday accommodation in England is chosen based on adverts in the Church Times. I believe Dr. Cox wrote for the paper as well. He knew the editor and the reporters. Enid has included adverts from the back pages, which have made her laugh. Some of them were considered funny because a small salary was being offered for a lot of work. The titles to the adverts were written by Enid. Advertisements from the Church Times. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Young lady wanted to pay a few shillings weekly and give light morning services. Musical preferred. Apply. Useful. Merebank, Lake Road, Fairhaven, Lytham. Blow the expense. An elderly lady wishes to hear of a superior home as paying guest, where she can have her maid with her. Will pay liberally, 15 to 18 guineas weekly, for good rooms and every home comfort, clear dry air essential, highest references given and expected. Bridger Hart, agent, 19 Beak Street, Regent Street, West. Stamped addressed envelope if writing. Easy light situations. Lady help. Rector's widow requires lady help early in December. 2 children, 3.5 and 2 years. Salary £10. Laundry. No servant kept. Apply. Mrs. Tripp, Williton, Somerset. Wanted. Nursery governess for 3 children, from 5 to 1.5 years old. Salary £12 to start. Full particulars to Mrs. A, 36 Thornbury Road, Spring Grove, Isleworth. Would you like her? Mrs. Addenbrooke, Tutbury Vicarage, Staffordshire, would be glad to know of a home, in the Midlands if possible, for an elderly, superior, refined woman without a penny in the world. A good churchwoman, can play piano well and do light household duties. Widowers, beware. A lady, middle-aged, desires to enter a family as paying guest. She wishes to go where there are children in whom she can take an interest and help to start them in life, if poor financially. The lady is now weary of living in apartments and wishes to enter a family of refinement where she will be kindly treated. Has good means and will pay well. Is accustomed to church work. Widower's house preferred. Bridge Hart, agent, 19 Beak Street, Regent Street, West. Stamped addressed envelope if writing. A penny for their thoughts. Thoughtful maid for thoughtful mistress. Good wages and home, 3 in family. Little washing and cooking indispensable. Apply between 4 to 6. 47 Baronsmere Road, opposite each Finchley station. Now then, ladies. Invalid recommends her attendant. Young man, age 21, for similar post. Or hospital porter, 15 months experience. Doctor and nurse recommend. Trustworthy, capable, abstainer. Apply to Mrs. X, Marian Library, Deal. Not gone, but not forgotten. In loving memory of Edith Louisa Newton Budden, who died on 6th of December 1898, in the 36th year of her age, daughter of Samuel and Louisa Budden. Present residence, 61 Ladbroke Road, Redhill, Surrey. Advertisement from the Times, December the 6th. Finally, The last item in the Christmas budget is an advert for Garfield House Prep School in Plymouth, which one of the siblings wrote. I don't know which sibling wrote it, but it wasn't Arthur or Avice. Advertisement, Garfield House School, Stoke Damerel, Devonport. Warden and Chaplain, Prebendary Punts. Principal, A. H. Machell Cox, M.A., Trinity College, Cambridge. Stoke Damerel is the residential suburb of Devonport. Garfield House occupies an exposed position and when last seen was standing on high ground. Boys are taken between the ages of 6 and 15. Usual subjects taught. Anything else is an extra and will be charged for accordingly. The school has its own backyard, the outdoor life of the boys being fully considered. The greatest care is taken of the health and welfare of the boys, the domestic arrangements being under the personal charge of Mrs. Cox, Miss Cox, Mrs. Parsons, and the Misses Mabel and Ellen. Every effort is made to promote a tone of manliness and self-reliance in the school. Pillow fighting is officially recognised and encouraged. The bathing arrangements are under the supervision of Miss Cox, who will wash with her own hands any boy who requires it. Wash and brush up, twopence. The bathroom is next door to the drawing room, a convenient plan, as it allows visitors to catch a glimpse of the excellent washing arrangements when they are calling. Fees payable in advance. For boarders, very moderate. For weekly boarders, very reasonable. For day boys, quite unreasonable. One girl has joined the school, as it is desired to give the boys all the advantages that can be obtained from their coming into daily contact with a refined feminine influence. At the beginning of each term, every boy must make a statutory declaration before a commissioner of oaths that he is free from infection, and that he has a conscientious objection to corporal punishment. Any boy failing to comply with this regulation will be caned immediately on arrival. Parents will be received once a fortnight at Garfield House, when tea and light refreshments will be provided gratis. Parents who have any complaints to make will please put them in writing. One side of the paper only should be used, and a stamped addressed envelope enclosed for reply. The principal cannot hold himself responsible for the return of rejected manuscripts. After Christmas Day in 1907, this special edition of the budget was posted to Edmund in Derbyshire, Enid in Liverpool, and Arthur in Plymouth, before being posted abroad to Malawi, South Africa, and Canada. Several of the siblings say they enjoy reading it so much that they want to keep it and read it again, and are very sad that they have to post it on. The 1907 Christmas budget then returns to England and resides in the bottom of a wardrobe, except when it is taken out and reread in later years as the siblings relive their youth. In the 1980s, along with all the other documents, it was deposited safely in the Bodleian Library, which is where I discovered it. There are several more special Christmas budgets in the years to come, before the First World War, which disrupted everything. In the next episode of 100 Years of Cox, the siblings are all back in their own homes, and it is January 1908. They discuss the Christmas budget, pick their favourite bits, and congratulate each other. They continue to discuss nightshirts versus pyjamas, and Avice joins in, which was a bit shocking, as it was inconceivable for a lady to wear a suit of pyjamas. Edmund announces that he has a new job. He was appointed curate in charge of St Bartholomew's, Hallam Fields in Derbyshire, and he will stay at the same church from 1908 until the 1950s. This means he and his girlfriend, May, who has barely been mentioned in the budget letters, can finally afford to get married after many years of being engaged. 100 Years of Cox. The Machell Cox budget letters and all content is subject to copyright and belongs to both myself and the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Machell Cox Letters is on Twitter @CoxLetters. If you have any questions, please write to me or send me an email, machellcoxletters@gmail.com. You have been listening to 100 Years of Cox. Thank you for listening.